Hello everybody, it's Hugh here at Loxone. I'm here with another one of our Focus series webinars. So as always, we like to look at an in-depth topic in Loxone or how we can solve a particular issue or a particular function block. Now for today, what I wanted to do is I wanted to introduce a new feature that will be coming in Config version 11. This feature is System Schematic. So we're going to take a look at what System Schematic is, what it does, what it's there for, and how we configure it. So, System Schematic, what it is, you can think of it like an overview block. And so what it allows us to do is it allows us to give a graphical representation of something in the installation. So we can upload an image and we can overlay function blocks, or actually this is slightly out of date, this text. We can overlay function blocks and in fact actually anything that can be visualized onto this overlay. So we could overlay specific function blocks like lighting controllers, room controllers, climate controllers, etc. We could even overlay just inputs and outputs on the system as well. Anything that can be visualized, we can overlay on an image. So when would we use it? Why would we use it? How would we use it? Some great examples could be something like an open plan office to overlay the lighting controller, the room controller, as well as things like blinds. It will show you on the image, lighting controller, and it will even tell you what mood it's currently in. It will tell you what position the blinds are in, what temperature the room is currently in. Other than that, it can be used for things like facilities management in large domestic properties or commercial properties. So we could end up with a system schematic like this, where we could have quite a complex heating layout, for example, and we could overlay key information so we can visualize it in one place. Because I don't know about you, but I am a visual learner. I find it much easier to follow a picture than I do to follow lots and lots and lots of words and text. And so that's the beauty of it. In config, it is a single function block, and I will show you that now. So what I've got is on this demo case over here, I have created myself a rather complex heating system. So by no means am I saying that this heating system is correct. I spent about 20 minutes configuring this to give an idea of how System Schematic could work. So please use this as a System Schematic video rather than a heating video. But I've created myself a little image of how this particular heating system works. So we have a buffer storage tank, we have thermal solar system, so with thermal solar panels on the roof. We've got an oil tank as a reserve for if the boiler fails and the thermal solar isn't running. We've got a boiler, we've got a buffer storage tank which has several different layers. We tap off at different layers for different things. We've then got a manifold which feeds our rooms, and at the top we've got domestic hot water. To me, looking at this in a diagram, I can look at that and go, okay, I understand this heating layout. If this heating layout is configured in Loxone, it can all work absolutely perfectly, but in the user interface, it could be a little bit confusing to look through because we could go into each room and we could see what each room is doing. Don't worry that it says 0 degrees, it's because I don't really have any temperature sensors. But when we're in the background of it, it can start looking quite complex. If I go into the whole house, we can see that the boiler's currently on, the oil tank's empty, the solar pump is off, and we can see what the mixing valve controller is doing. So we can see everything in separation, but we can't visualize it all in one space. And this is where the System Schematic could come in perfectly. So I could take something like a System Schematic, which is its own function block, drop it onto a page. It will then open with this dialog where I get to add in a picture. This can be a JPEG or a PNG, up to 2000 kilobytes. So there is one I prepared earlier that I used a free online chart program to make. And you can see here is my System Schematic. I can zoom in and out. And then from this, I can start adding my elements. So I go to add objects here. And let's start by adding this thermal solar. So I can do a filter, find my thermal solar controller. Yep. and I could add that in. So that's a function block. So I can add it in just there. I can also, on all of the objects, change the object to image ratio size as well. So I can very, very nicely adjust how big this appears in the app relative to the image. Cool. I could also add myself in this thermal solar pump. So if I search for pump, there's my solar pump. This is just a relay. That's an output. But because it can be visualized, I can show it on the system schematic. Then my buffer storage tank, that's going to be my temperatures. So I've got 3 temperature sensors, as you can see here, which are again just analog inputs. Those are the analog inputs at the top of my demo case. So buffer temperature top, buffer temperature low, buffer temperature middle. I know in a real buffer tank, it may have many, many more levels than that. So there's middle, so I could stick that in the middle. There's low, so I could stick that at the bottom. And there is top, so I could stick that at the top. Cool, so that's that bit done, and that bit done. Now, let's move over to the oil tank. So what have I got for my oil tank that I've already added? Well, again, I could add the relay, which I'm using to trigger the oil tank. But I've also got a status block, which I'm using for the level of the oil tank, because what I've got is I'm assuming that there'll be a pressure sensor or a level sensor in that oil tank that will be analog, 0 to 10 volts. So I've put that into a status block with a little bit of logic to say which different voltages mean tank level. So I could visualize that status block as well. And so what I could do is I could say that the oil tank level, which is the status block, that could show on the side next to it in the oil tank, so that relay could be underneath. Cool. Then let's move over to this boiler. So again, add objects. What have I got for the boiler? I've got the boiler relay, which is the trigger for it. Again, just a digital output. And I've also assumed that we'll have some kind of input to say whether the boiler is in fault. I could view that or I couldn't, up to me. I'm just going to do the boiler trigger. So boiler, stick that under there. And then finally, our manifold stuff. So again, start adding objects. We've got a zone valve. Yep, there we go, underfloor heating zone valve. We have a pump, underfloor heating pump, cool. We have a mixing valve controller. So you can see the mixing valve controller I can also show on here as well. And then finally, I wanted to show one room intelligent room controller, which is the living room. So then let's search for living room, intelligent room controller, living room. Select all of them, okay, and you'll see every time it sticks them up into the top right corner for us. So the first one is the mixing valve controller, that would go there. Then we've got the intelligent room controller, that could go there. Then we've got the underfloor heating pump, that could go there. Then we've got the zone valve, which could go there. Cool. All of my different elements are now laid out on my system schematic. Last thing to do is what is the default object to visualize in the system schematic for when we're not drilled down into it. To me, that would probably be something like the buffer middle temperature sensor. So buffer temperature middle, cool. Okay, this, save it in, and then we can visualize it in the app. So head back over to the app. App is rebooting. When the mini server is rebooted, now under my whole house, system schematic. And as I said, we wanted to visualize the mid-level temperature, which is what you can see there. Again, haven't got anything wired into those analog inputs. That's why it's reading 0. Open it up, and there's our system schematic. And as you can see, all of the different elements overlaid onto it. I can zoom in, zoom out. If I'm zoomed in, I can drag my mouse to go to different areas as well. And we can see the state of everything. And if it is a particular function block, so let's say something like the mixing valve controller, if I click on it, it actually takes me to that function block in the app as well. So really, really cool, really functional. And to really show you this working, what I can do is in config, I'm going to move config over to my second screen, and I'm going to start live view with manual value adjustment. So I can actually start tweaking some of these settings and some of these values so that you can see them change in real life. So that buffer temperature top, that is actually my potentiometer. So we can see that we're at, let's say, 64 degrees at the top. Then let's say our thermal solar temperature. So what temperature would the panels be on the top of the roof? They'd probably be quite hot. There we go. So we can now see the buffer is being heated because the thermal solar panels have gone above a certain level. We can see that the thermal solar pump is on as well. Our mid-level sensor, that could be at, I don't know, let's say 40 degrees. Oh, sorry, got the wrong one. Mid-level, let's say 50 degrees. And lower level, let's say that's at 40 degrees. So you can see all of that being symbolized there. We can see that the boiler's currently off because the thermal solar's taken over. We can see that the zone valve is on. The reason the pump isn't on, because I have actually done a little bit of config to say that the zone valve has to completely open before the pump can come on. So we can see now that the pump's come on, and we can see that the mixing valve is at 64.2 degrees and our target temperature is 40 odd degrees. So on my physical mini server, I can see that it's closing the mixing valve. And then oil tank is currently empty. So let's start adjusting that oil tank level so that it's no longer empty. There we go, oil tank's now half full. And then finally on our living room, let's say that the living room is currently at 17 degrees. And there we go. And so now, fully working system schematic, and we can see all the different elements that I might want to visualize all being visualized on here. I know whether my solar thermal's on or not, whether the solar thermal pump is. I know the temperatures at the different levels of my tank, whether the boiler's on or off, whether the oil, whether the oil heater's on or off, what level the oil tank is at, my living room, and my entire manifold system. And to me, visualizing like that is so much easier than seeing it all as different independent parts. And I can quite easily, from this system schematic as well, click in there and boom, I'm straight into my living room intelligent room controller. Perfect. And so that is a system schematic, and that is the kind of ways that we can use it in Loxone. It is incredibly flexible because you can overlay just about any input or output or function block on it, use it however you want for whatever purpose you want. For me, something like a heating system, a heating schematic is a perfect use for it. As always, this config file, as well as this video, will be available on our website as well, so you can take a really close look at what I've done here, get your head around it, and start playing around with it yourself. As I said, this is a version 11 feature. So for me, currently, it is the 21st of April, 2020. So if you are viewing this video around that date, then you will need the public beta. The public beta already contains system schematic. So give it a whirl, stick it on your demo case, try it out. If version 11 has already been released, then you'll be able to see this on our downloads page and give it a whirl. Thank you all very much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed. Tune in again next time. Goodbye, guys.